Yeah, hello everybody out there with another Tea Talk. Today we have Rob Hopkins as the guest here. Hello, Rob.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, for you, I think it's 1 hour later than Switzerland. And yeah, maybe for them, for those who connect for the first time in this Tea Talk, Tea Talks are live streams on social media and actually warm-up events for the upcoming Rethink Festival, which will take place on Friday and Saturday. And we invite speakers to these Tea Talks. And you, Rob, you are also having a session, actually the keynote, the opening keynote. And the title is How to Imagine a Day in the Future. Rethinking neighborhoods, workplaces, and organizations, we can build the future we want today. Yeah. So, Rob, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm very well, thank you. Yes, I must just sort of explain. Normally, that very nice picture of that clean-shaven fella that you showed before we started. We are currently halfway through lockdown, the second lockdown here in the UK, and my kids challenged me at the beginning to not shave until the end. So I've just reached that stage of not shaving where it looks like lockdown has sort of broken you, but but actually that's why I'm looking like this. So just to inform everybody, yeah, no, I'm doing okay. I'm like everybody, I think, trying to make sense of these crazy times that we live in. But the sun is shining for the first time in about a week here, and I'm feeling good. Yeah.
Wonderful. And you still live in Totnes, right? Is that right?
I live just on the edge of Totnes. Yeah, I live in a place called Dartington, which is sort of just on the edge of Totnes. Yeah, I've lived here for about 15 years now. I love it. It's I can't really imagine living anywhere else. It's Totnes is a town of about 9,000 people, but it's also the sea, and it's quite close to Dartmoor, which is a beautiful wild place. And it's also has a mainline railway station, so that you can get to. I can actually get from Totnes to Brussels quicker than I can get from Totnes to Manchester sometimes. So it's the world is also feels at my fingertips. So yeah, I love it. It's beautiful.
Nice. And I'm wondering, do you have a garden actually? Are you an active gardener? I know that you also had a permaculture education, but do you still have a garden today?
Yeah, I still have a garden. It's sort of over there, and it's a south-facing sloping garden. So we've terraced it in terraced vegetable beds, and we have apple trees. We currently have more apples than we know what to do with. So we're either having apple pies and apple crumbles and apple cakes, and just to get through all these apples. Yeah, it's a really important thing for me we have a little greenhouse as well. So gardening growing food has been a part of my life for a long time now. So my kids have always grown up in a house where food is grown and harvested and prepared and cooked, and that always felt like a really important and integral part of their childhood for me. That all of that stuff was just really everyday and normal. And actually this year, because of lockdown, we grew the best vegetable garden we ever have. The last few years it's been a little bit unloved and a bit sort of thrown together. This year it really had a lot more care and attention, so we had good harvest this year.
Yeah, I have the same actually. Staying at home, you have the opportunity to actually really take care of your soil and your plants. This is definitely positive aspect of Corona and the lockdown. And
yeah, there was definitely a huge. By the way, I bought my tea for the tea talk. Yeah, it was a huge thing here that the number of people growing food was massively increased here, and online seed companies had to impose rations on. You could order 6 things or whatever. It was really phenomenal, and to see how many gardens started to have food in them, and how many people were engaging in that was really inspiring to me. Because it was one of the things with lockdown was there was so many of those things where we were always told we were kind of completely naive for imagining were even possible. You know, the idea that actually if you created the right conditions, and you gave people a bit more space, that loads of people would love to grow food and have a garden. It's not that people don't grow food because they can't be bothered. It's often people don't grow the food because they don't have the space. And under the right conditions and with the right kind of support and the right kind of story around it, people love to do that kind of thing. And actually we saw that during lockdown, as with so many things that we were told were impossible actually turned out to be possible within a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, which leads to the topic of transition town, basically, and the transition movement also. I mean, for those who are not familiar with transition town, you are the co-founder of it, the Transition Network. Can you explain what it is, what is the goal, and how it evolved over, let's say, the last decade?
Yeah, so it was something that I was one of the people who started it here in Totnes in about 2005, 2006. The original idea was, what would a community response to climate change look like? You know, there are those things we can do as individuals. We can, you know, buy more local food and turn off our light bulbs and things like that, and stop flying and stop eating meat, and all of those things are really, really important. And there are all the things that the government needs to do, and Extinction Rebellion and other organizations are absolutely right that we also need to bring the pressure to bear on those organizations to get them to change and to show the kind of leadership that the climate and ecological emergency demands. But we felt, well, there's a bit in the middle here. There's a bit in the middle that what could we do as people who live in towns and neighborhoods and cities? What could we do where we are now here with the people that we have and the resources that we have and the knowledge that we have of this place that someone coming in from central government with a board wouldn't have? What we do right now to get started with a sense of possibility and urgency. So it's kind of the missing piece for me, you know, and I would never say that, you know, transition, sometimes people say, well, transition's not going to save the world on its own. It's like, well, we never claimed it would, but actually it's a vital piece of the jigsaw, because as communities we can move faster, we can be more nimble, we don't need to wait for anyone's permission, we can just get on with it, and we can start to show new stories and to demonstrate new stories. And so the transition movement now, it started here in our little town, and you can now find transition groups in 50 countries in the world, in thousands of communities. And we tend to describe the transition movement as being a movement of communities who are reimagining and rebuilding the world. And that balance of those two things is really important, because because those kind of spaces for people to intentionally reimagine the future are far and few between these days. You very rarely encounter those kind of spaces where we could say, right, what could we do? Let's come together and imagine, and then let's go and do it, you know. And transition, I think, has evolved as a really also a really great body of knowledge and experience and stories about how to do this and how it works. And a lot of my role is really that of being a kind of a storyteller. You know, I gather up the stories from around this movement and then spread them out through the movement. And it's kind of optimistic, and it's positive, and it's practical, and it also recognizes the need for designing care into these movements, that we need to look after each other as well, and to make sure we don't burn out and get too tired. So as I say, you know, you'll find transition groups now in Brazil, in favelas in Sao Paulo, you'll find them in towns in Japan, you'll find them many of them across London, and you know, that there are now local places where local governments are being elected with people from transition movement in. There are mayors who are being elected on a kind of we're going to do transition kind of a ticket in different parts of the world. It's been a fascinating self-organizing thing, and it's always intriguing because it always does things you don't expect.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably, for those who listen to this video, there's probably a transition movement in your town, and actually also in my town. It's still small, but it's evolving. And yeah, I mean, look out for this transition movements and join it. It's a wonderful idea, and I'm actually very impressed about the size of it. And you said it's kind of self-organizing. How can somebody get involved in the transition movement? Yeah, how is that actually possible?
You just go along and say, hello, can I get involved? I mean, I guess, there is a thing on the Transition Network website called Transition Near Me, where you put in your address and it'll tell you what's happening near where you live. And that's very useful. Also, many countries now, 25, 26 countries have what we call a national hub. So Transition Italy, Transition Switzerland, Transition wherever, where there is a national organization who would be able to tell you more kind of what's happening in that country and are translating resources into that language. The self-organizing thing was very, very intentional from the beginning. We didn't want to become a kind of a membership organization. We didn't want to become like a Coca-Cola franchise that was very kind of top down and centrally organized. We designed it specifically to be something whereby we designed it to be something that from the outset people could pick up and could make it their own. We were very inspired by stuff at the time around how self-organizing happens in natural systems. How do cells self-organize? How do things self-organize? And we designed a very simple set of values and principles where you could say, yeah, I agree with that, and then you were kind of in, really. So we always say there's no annual membership fee. You don't have to pay anything to get involved in transition. All the resources are free. There's only one commitment, which is that you share your stories. And so it becomes like a kind of a network of storytelling, which is one of the things that I just love about it. And for me, I feel like one of the great successes of the transition movement is that there are during the time where we've been doing transition, there have been other things like Occupy, like some of the movements like that sort of come up really quickly, like a mushroom in an autumn field in the morning. They go poof, they're there, and then they kind of go again, like a souffle. They kind of go poof, and then they don't sustain that kind of energy. The fact that the transition movement has still existed after 13, 14, 15 years feels pretty amazing to me, and part of that is because of the degree to which, when we founded it, we founded it on the idea that we would be giving away any power that we held in that organization. So the national hubs now, they hold the kind of the power, such as it is in those countries, and that's kind of why it's so interesting, I think, because there's a huge amount of trust in it, and people take it and do extraordinary things with it that we would never have thought of. And that's part of the beauty of it, really. If you're a control freak, designing something like the transition movement is just going to be a heartache. But when you aren't, that's a constant source of fascination and amazing stories.
Mm-hmm. I guess a lot of people heard about you and maybe transition movement because of the movie Tomorrow, Demain. You were one of the protagonists, basically introducing the transition idea. And I was wondering, actually, in the end, there is all this happening out there in the world, and whether it's the US election or climate change, and people still fly if they could, if there is not COVID, but there is COVID. We have so many strange things happening, and I'm wondering what you think. Should we do another Tomorrow movie to bring this idea to the people, or where is the where is the leverage point where we can bring these ideas to life, or should we actually push that? Should we believe in a more organic development? I'm wondering what you think about that.
I feel like everybody is trying to figure that out at the moment. I feel like, you know, during lockdown, I've done lots of webinars and workshops with different organizations, with transition groups, with Extinction Rebellion groups, with university groups, with political organizations, and everyone is trying to figure this out. And, you know, and I do workshops with Extinction Rebellion groups who say, and some of them are saying, well, you know, maybe we need to be more like the transition movement and work from the ground up and do stuff at the community scale. And then I talk to people in transition groups who are saying, well, maybe we need to be more and more like Extinction Rebellion and a bit more kind of confrontational and noisy about all of this. You know, I feel like everybody is kind of trying to figure it out. And you mentioned Demain, the film, tomorrow, in which I was a lot cleaner shaven than I am this morning. I feel like that film, I think there's a really interesting piece of research for someone to do in a couple of years about the impact that film had and tracing the impact that film had. They made a sequel called Après Demain, which was really interesting, which told the story of the film and the impact that it had, and spoke to a lot of people who had seen it and then done incredible things based on it. You know, I meet so many projects and people and places where that came out of that film, and so many doors opened to me because I was the guy in that film. You know, I think in France I'm still known as the guy out of Demain. You know, people go, the first time we heard of you was in Demain. You know, actually, the power of that film. I think I remember I went to the premiere of it at the UGC. Normandy, what's it called? Anyway, a big cinema on the Champs-Élysées where they had this premiere, 1,400 people in a cinema, extraordinary, and it was just phenomenal. I loved it, and then I around that time I went to about another 4 or 5 screenings. It was during COP21 in Paris, and I was there, and it was. The thing that struck me was that at every screening I went to, at least half the audience were young people. And in the UK, if you go to a film about environmentalism, that's often not the case. And after about the 4th screening, a group of young people came up to me and they said, "We love this film so much." And I said, "Why? Why do you love this film so much?" And they said, "Because after the Bataclan attacks in Paris, we lost our story. We didn't know what was our story. What are we here for? What's the point of it? You know? And now we have a story." And I feel like in the context of all the research I did about imagination for the last couple of years, you know, our ability to be imaginative is only as strong as the diversity of things that we carry in our memory. Because being imaginative is basically going to the cupboard of your memory and opening the cupboard and saying, what would happen if I put that together with that? And that's the kind of imagining bit, is the unique creations that we make of assembling things that exist within our memory. If we live our lives in a way where our memory contains no solution, it contains no positive stories about what you can do about climate change, it makes it really, really difficult to be imaginative about the future. What Demain did was it's a bit like if you're a student and you don't have any food in the cupboard and your mum comes to visit and fills that cupboard up with food, so you've got loads and loads of stuff that's going to last you for ages. It kind of did that, you know, and it people those solutions. Well, what could we do about food? Oh, you could do that and that, and energy, and we could do that and that and that. And one of the problems I think that we have in the English-speaking world is that we haven't had a film like that. You know, in France now, I see that the impact of that film, you know, in the Citizens' Assembly that was created, that Cyril was part of creating, in the big sort of sweep of Green and municipalist parties in the elections that were held in March, in the number of people who were going into politics who were inspired by that, by all the young people I meet everywhere who say, yeah, I saw that's what I want to do. That's what I want my future to be. So what's my role in it? How do I make that happen? You know, it had a profound impact, that film, I think. And I feel like we really need one of those for the English-speaking world and for many different places too.
Yeah, interesting. Do you know any, like, I'm just doing now? Do you know anybody working on it for the English speaking world? Or I'm sure there are projects out there. Maybe you are even involved in one, or you're not aware of.
I mean, I'm sure they're. I'm sure they're. See, because I think the thing they did that was so important was they that film single-handedly reimagined what films about the environment should be like. Because normally, up until that point, they were like 97% horrendous, heartbreaking footage of tar sands and orangutans being flattened by bulldozers and just awful things. And then the little 2 minutes on the end where they would say, "Hey, but maybe we could do something about it." By which point you were like,
"Yeah,
I don't believe it," you know. And they turned that round. They said, we do the problem in the first 3 minutes, and then we just go and we look at solutions. And it's beautiful, and the soundtrack's great, and it looks like Instagram. And then there have been films like 2040, which was a kind of an attempt to vision the future, which I had some kind of problems with. I think for me, one of the best things I've seen is the film that the LEAP project in the US made with Naomi Klein and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, that was called Years of Repair. That's like telling the story of the next 10 years with drawing and animation. And that was really, really good, I think. But yeah, I don't know the film.
Yeah, so it seems you're very enthusiastic about storytelling. And I saw that you also started the podcast, which is going in this direction. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the podcast, what it is and why you started it.
Yeah, well, I finished the book, which is called Mr. What If. And then when lockdown started, and I was thinking, okay, what's a good lockdown project? And I thought I'll start a podcast, which is called From What If to What Next. And the idea of the podcast is that listeners and subscribers send in what if questions, and then I find the two best people I can to then explore how we might move it from being a what if question to being a what next to being a kind of a reality in the world. And we just published the 15th episode. We've done things like what if birdsong drowned out the traffic? What if doctors' practices became catalysts for transition? What if a universal basic income sparked a revival of the imagination? What if we decolonized education? What if resources that currently go into criminal justice went into the communities instead? And things like that. It's been phenomenal. And one of my favorite things that we do, two of my favorite things that we do with the podcast, is the beginning of every episode, I ask the guests to walk us through a day in the life in 2030 if the what if question that we're discussing had become a reality. So they talk us through, like if it was, what if we had a universal basic income? Well, actually, yeah, what would it be like in 10 years' time if a universal basic income had been introduced in 2022? What could it be like in 2030? Describe it to us. What's a day in the life like? What's it like walking down the street? Does it smell different? Does it taste different? How is people's everyday life different than it was back in 2020? And it's really moving and powerful. And it kind of allows you into the imagination of activists as it is they get out of bed every morning and do what they do. And we recently made a bonus episode where we kind of spliced all of it together. And it's just beautiful. It's like a kind of a warm bath of possibility. And it brings it alive in such a way, in a way that talking about policies and facts and numbers just absolutely don't. I always say to people, if the climate emergency and ecological emergency was something that would have been solved with rational arguments and facts and figures, we would have done it in the 80s when it would have been so much easier. This is really about how do we create longing for a different future. Longing for me is such a huge, powerful, deep kind of a word. How do we create longing for a post-carbon future? And that's about imagination and storytelling. And the other thing that we do in the podcast that I love, which is that we do people who subscribe to it on Patreon get a bonus podcast called The Ministry of Imagination, where we imagine there is a thing called the Ministry of Imagination, which was set up to create the ideal conditions for the imagination to flourish within society. And the Ministry of Imagination itself has become like a whole character in the podcast, where it is a ministry literally built of blocks of imagination, and some weeks it decides it doesn't want to be a ministry, and actually it's just you, and it's run away to join the circus or itself into a big carnival or all kinds of different things. It's really fun. And then I invite the guests to come up with 3 policies that they would enact this afternoon that would massively accelerate our journey towards whatever it is that we've been talking about. So it's kind of playful and it's fun, and for me it's something that really allows people to feel into, you know, rather than just having very earnest conversations about, yes, a universal basic income would be a very good idea because it would okay, well, let's actually really allow ourselves to feel and expand into that space of what would it be like if that actually existed, you know. So it's yeah, I love it. It's a joy. I never imagined myself as a podcast presenter, but it seems to come quite naturally.
I guess that in your keynote on Saturday, you will also bring up a couple of stories, because I just read the title again, How to Imagine a Day in the Future. It's actually about that, maybe more related to how we can organize our companies and team structures, and ultimately what is work for us and how can we imagine work in the future. Maybe you can tell a bit about your keynote and what you will talk about, so people can relate to it, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm still kind of thinking about it, really. I'm imagining that what I'm going to do is that it'll be a bit interactive. So I will actually take you to 2030. We are going to attempt something really quite bold and audacious. We're going to attempt the first act of collective time travel in the history of the Rethink Festival. So I will be bringing my time machine along, which is just over there, which I built during lockdown with some plans I found on the internet and just with some things I found in my garage, little simple electronic. And we're actually going to do a bit of time traveling to 2030 and have a look around. I'm going to talk a bit about what makes a really good what if question and why what if questions are so powerful and so important. And I'm going to play a little soundscape of some of the reflections that have come out through the podcast so far of people when I asked them to go to the future. So hopefully it's a workshop that at the end of it, you will feel that you have a very different relationship with the future. And we live in a culture where we so often default to dystopian visions of the future. We read that every Netflix is full of them. Our Twitter feeds are full of them. You know, we're surrounded by, you know, the many different ways that civilization is going down the pan very, very quickly, and everything is inevitably going to be awful. And the workshop with me on Saturday will be your opportunity to just allow yourself into that space of actually, what would it be like if we actually did this? What would it be like if the next 10 years were a time of profound social and environmental and cultural economic change that in 2020 felt unimaginable, but in 2030 we had done everything we could possibly have done? What would that be like? So that's what we'll do. We'll go there and we'll have a walk around and we'll spend some time there and we'll see how it feels. We'll try a transition, sustainable, resilient future on for size, and just to sort of see how it fits, we'll kind of take it for a test drive and see how it is.
Wonderful. Yeah, so actually, maybe my very last question here is, what will you do with the rest of the day, actually? What do you do today?
What do I do today? I have a meeting starting in half an hour. In Transition Network, we're doing this big program of events called Transition Bounce Forward, and we're planning a thing in February called the What Next Summit. So we have a meeting about the What Next Summit, and I don't know, a couple of things like that, a couple of meetings.
Maybe planting onions or garlic or something, or you already did that?
It's a bit early for that, really. I think we are in my house. Our gas boiler died about 4 months ago, so we've had no hot water and for about 4 months, which has been fine actually. But because we thought this is our moment to move away from gas and to have an air source heat pump instead. So next Monday we are having an air source heat pump fitted, and we're very excited about it. So I have to go also and collect some new radiators, because we have to make our radiators bigger. And so we are moving into the post-fossil fuel age in my house with great enthusiasm, and I can't wait for my first air source heat pump shower. It's been a very long time.
Nice. Yeah, so thank you, Rob Hopkins, for this tea talk, and everybody who wants to learn more about the transition movement, there is the website, and hope you'll join. And yeah, I mean, this was a very attractive pitch of your keynote, and yeah, we definitely can rethink what we do now and imagine a future we want. And so yeah, again, thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day.
My pleasure. Thank you. See you on Saturday.
Bye.